Hi, I'm Liebscher, the director of Jesus Culture. I'm here with our friend at Jesus Culture, Havilah Cunnington, who is the director of More Revolution. Recently, we joined forces and partnered with More Revolution and a curriculum that they've created that talks about and addresses this issue of sexuality. For us, it was important in Jesus Culture to really partner with More Revolution because we believe our mandate is to raise up revivalists, to raise up leaders that go into cities and nations to see them transformed. But the reality is, if we're going to see an awakening amongst a generation, we can't sidestep or ignore this issue of sexuality. It's something we have to talk about, and you guys have done a phenomenal job in this curriculum to do that. As we kind of jump into this and talk about the curriculum, tell me why you believe it's so important that we talk about this issue of sexuality, that both in the church, in the home, as believers. Why is it so important that we actually talk about this issue of sexuality?
I mean, we have to talk about it because who isn't talking about it? I mean, the whole culture, I think, is shouting a message of sexuality, and yet they weren't the ones that invented sex. God was the one that invented sex. And so we've got to start talking about it. Even if we're just beginning to talk about it, we've got to start the conversation. We can't be afraid to talk about it. And it's important that we start it. And we have gone to work to develop just a simple course, a simple lesson plan to help our church and communities begin to say, hey, here's how we can start the conversation, because Justin Timberlake did not bring sex back. God invented sex. I mean, he's the one, I love someone once said, he's the most sexy person alive. I mean, God is sexy. He's the one that invented it, and he is the one that knows how to teach us about original design. And he has a lot to say about it. He is not silent about it. He has a lot to say about it. So we want to help you. We want to help you talk about it. I think so many leaders don't know how to talk about it. They don't know. They're afraid to talk about it. They don't know how to start. And I think they're getting approached by a lot of their young people, and they don't know what to say.
Why do you think the church has avoided this issue? I mean, it is very kind of taboo and very kind of like hush hush, and this isn't just. You don't hear the church talk about this stuff much, and if you do, it's kind of a little on the fringes.
Right.
Why has the church avoided this issue?
You know, I think it comes down to a couple issues, and you know, a lot of us learn about sex in different environments. We broke it down. There are 3 environments that we learn about sex, and the first environment is the silent environment. And if you were to kind of look at an environment as a house, the silent environment is like the bedroom door shut. And so a lot of us grew up in environments where the bedroom door is shut, and no one told you anything about sex, and it was quiet, and you could only find out about it on TV programs and late night internet surfing and your friends at school, but no one told you anything about it. And then there's another environment, it's like a saturated environment where the bedroom door, there was no bedroom door, but it was like a casual, kind of a crude learning about sex. And it was almost from movie scenes and maybe even casual encounters of maybe a parent had a boyfriend or a girlfriend or your older brother or sister that had a sexual encounter around you, but you never learned about the sanctity of a spirit, soul, and body connection, and so you just didn't understand it. And then there was a conflicted environment, which is as if the bedroom door was a closing, open and close. And so this is very much the church environment where it's kind of like, don't look in the bedroom door, you know, God forbid, shame on you that you would even want to know it's in there. But then when you get married, you know, it's euphoric and amazing, and it should be like better than you could ever imagine because, well, you know, you got married, so you should know what to do. And there's this kind of conflicted thing that's happening. And I think what the reason leaders don't want to talk about it is because there's a lot of shame that's attached to the topic of sex. There's shame. Our stories a lot of times have shame involved with them, and we weren't taught by the people that loved us the most in a godly way or a healthy way. We weren't taught the story of it, so we don't really want to talk about it. And then secondly, I think we kind of fear the topic. We don't know how to start, and so we don't know. And so that's kind of why we started this topic and kind of wrote this curriculum, was we want to break that fear off to help you start the conversation.
I love you talk about the fear issue because, you know, whenever you encounter sexuality in the church, and many times it's this powerless, hopeless, discouraging, confused
yeah.
kind of feeling and all that. And what I love about what Moral Revolution's doing, what I love about what you've done with the curriculum,
yeah.
is it comes from a position of hope.
It is.
It comes from a position of life. It comes from a position of clarity. All of that discouragement, all of that hopelessness, all of that powerlessness, all of that confusion.
Yeah.
It really wants to say, no, we're not coming at sexuality from those angles. We're coming at sexuality from God's viewpoint, from biblical viewpoint, and that viewpoint is full of hope. It's full of life. It's not confusing.
Yeah.
And yet most of us in the church have felt the other way. So I love what you guys are doing with that.
Yeah, and kind of that no part of it's kind of that dark part of our world.
Yeah,
and yet our sexuality is so powerful. I mean, God, the part of family and life and marriage and our bodies, God invented all of it. It's the most beautiful, wonderful part of what He created in us, and it shouldn't be this dark part of our lives. And I think it's always been this kind of repentant part of, we always pray, God, take this sex drive away from us. I think and yet God's not going to take it away from us when He gave it to us. And so I think there's kind of been this part of us, I think, in the world where it's this church world where we've been praying, God, take this away, and yet God doesn't want to take things away from us. He wants to help us steward it in such a way that it honors Him. And I love the partnership that we have with Jesus Culture because, one thing we believe at Moral Revolution is that when we get our spirit and soul needs met in a healthy way, our physical needs calm down and everything begins to balance out. And that's why when we begin to have a relationship with Jesus and we get all of our needs getting met and us becoming revivalists, what we're called to, this is what the beautiful partnership is.
I think one of the things we run into in the church, even as you're talking right now, is a lot of us want to avoid this issue because it feels so private and intimate, and it is.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens in the bedroom is a very private, intimate thing. And so we kind of want to avoid it, but as you're talking, when we say there's curriculum on sexuality,
right,
we're not just going, all right, guys, sexuality is defined as sex in a bedroom. Let's talk about sex in a bedroom, which for a lot of people is like, whoa, that's like a pretty private, intimate thing. I don't know if I want to talk about that. And it's so much broader than that in that, listen, if we're going to talk about sexuality, we have to talk about the things you just mentioned, which are needs getting met and so many other things.
Right. And that's what the whole curriculum is we're not just talking about the act of sex. We're talking about that God created you as a spirit, soul, and body person. There are 3 parts to you. And if we don't get any of those needs met, and they all have needs, you will not be a whole person.
Yeah.
And so many times our sexuality is dysfunctional when there's things that aren't met. Yeah. And so when the 6th course that we've created for Jesus Culture and for anyone who's out there that's part of our team, our community, is really, it breaks it down. And the beginning part is we do talk about what does it look like to be a powerful person. We talk about 5 power beliefs. If I'm a trustworthy person, I'm a powerful person, I believe God, I trust God. I mean, you have to have core beliefs before you begin to trust God with your sexuality. Yeah. And we talk about like your physical, your anatomy and how there's dopamine and serotonin and vasopressin. There are actual things that happen in your body that God created. So you can't just do things with your body and disconnect and then act like, well, it's not happening into my spirit soul. I mean, these are things that happen. And so God didn't make a mistake. He created all forms. And so we don't just disconnect. And so that's all really important.
Which feels very empowering and very hopeful.
It is.
Yes.
Very.
Well, listen, we are really honored to be able to partner with you guys. Listen, you can find out more about this curriculum, more about the partnership between Jesus Culture and Moral Revolution at jesusculture.com/emerge.